I'm Peter Block in Chicago at ACC 2016 for On the Scene, and it is the end of day 3 and it's a wrap-up. With me is Tony DeMaria, my old friend who's done this with me many times before. So Tony, we've got 3 trials we want to talk about. We've got fire and ice, we've got lung impedance and ventricular fibrillation. Tell me about fire and ice, sort of a hot, nice name.
Yeah, fire and ice.
Hot and cold, I should say.
Very interesting trial. Actually, there were a number of trials that dealt with cardiac arrhythmias we might talk about in a moment, but fire and ice tested the hypothesis that cryoablation, which is quicker and easier to perform, and so perhaps more readily applicable in smaller hospitals, would be non-inferior to the standard RF. And of course, RF, radio frequency ablation, is heat. Cryoablation is cold. They randomized a large group of patients, and in fact, the cryoablation was non-inferior. Importantly, the major reason not to do cryoablation, shown in a prior study, was that you got phrenic nerve injury. But in this new technique, phrenic nerve injury was not a problem.
Well, they used a larger balloon, and the good news is the time to do all this is considerably shorter, 20-25 minutes. So it's a big deal in terms of just getting the patient off the table.
Yeah, no question. We do have to admit, though, 40% recurrence of arrhythmia during the study, so that the whole field of ablation needs to get a little bit better.
Yeah, they need to be a lot better at that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
So tell me about what else you learned about atrial fibrillation today.
So, post-op atrial fib. The question is, are you better off doing rhythm control, cardioversion, AMIO, or rate control? Simple answer, they're equal.
What a surprise.
Yeah. So you can do either one. And an interesting say, well, why don't you go on?
Okay, well, no, finish up.
Well, there was a significant study that looked at whether or not in cardiac arrest patients who were refractory to cardioversion, whether AMIO or lidocaine was better. And in fact, what they demonstrated was that neither one of those agents was any better than placebo for their primary endpoint, which was hospital discharge. However, in the witnessed cardiac arrest, amiodarone in particular, but also lidocaine, were effective. So the message there is get to them early.
Get to them early, and you can give them Lido, which is a pretty safe drug.
Yeah, very safe.
Yeah. Okay, so you've already taken the wind out of our sails, because I said ventricular fibrillation as the 3rd trial, so we've done that. So we're back to lung impedance. Let me talk a little bit about that.
Please.
This is a cool technology. This is a technology where non-invasively you can measure lung impedance, and this is really a trial that showed that it could be done. But the short version is the less impedance that you can measure across the lung means more fluid in the lung, because water or saline in the lung, which is really what happens when you get pulmonary edema, gives you less impedance. So the short version is this can measure lung impedance very nicely simply by putting electrodes on the chest. The hope is that this might be something that patients could do at home, and then with telemetry send it to the doc, not to take care of patients that are going into pulmonary edema, but to keep them from going into pulmonary edema or into more heart failure. I think it's an exciting possible technology. Sort of keep our eye on it because it's still early, but it's interesting stuff, and it is, I think, where we're going in medicine, where the doc is going to be told about his patients when the patient isn't there.
Very, very promising. We did have to acknowledge that they dealt with a very advanced population in terms of the severity of their heart failure, so may not be quite as effective in patients who have a milder degree of heart failure.
We'll see. A lot to learn still there. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.